Thank you. Thank you, distinguished Commissioner of Police Acting, the coordinators of this program, and of course all the participants of this program. It's a pleasure to be here this morning and to be afforded an opportunity to speak to you on the importance of the public relations arm of the Guyana Police Force. And I see a sub-theme here, restoring public trust while enhancing enforcement. These are very important concepts to good policing. And the distinguished Commissioner Acting informed us that there were so many studies and commissions and recommendations done over the years, which has informed how the police force should be shaped and should be restructured and organized, and the role of a new PR front be established to push the force forward. But unless we understand what the Guyana Police Force is, what it means in the society in which it is located, then all of it will be lost. The Guyana Police Force is the premier law enforcement agency within the state of Guyana. As the first, the premier law enforcement agency within the state of Guyana. Its objectives are stated in the Police Act, and if I may be permitted to quote, the force shall be employed for the prevention and detection of crime, the preservation of law and order, the preservation of peace, the repression of internal disturbance, the protection of property, the apprehension of offenders, and the due enforcement of all laws and regulations with which it is directly charged, and shall perform such military duties within Guyana as may be required of it under the authority of a minister. Now, those are very, very amplified and amplifying powers and duties which the laws of Guyana, the Police Act, has devolved onto the police force. To discharge these varying functions and objectives, the law in its majesty has conferred upon the police force a tremendous array of powers over the other citizens of the state. The Guyana Police Force, under the Constitution, is authorized to take actions which ordinarily would amount to the encroachment of what are called the fundamental rights and freedoms of our citizens. That is the power that the police force holds over the ordinary citizens. So you have the right of arrest. You have the right to take away the liberty of the subject. You have the right to confiscate private property. You have the right to search and seize, and a whole host of such rights and powers, all of which are authorized by the Constitution and the laws of Guyana. Right away you see how easy it is for abuse of rights to take place if a police force does not act reasonably and within the confines of the law. And the police force is not a new organization. It's, I believe, over 170 years old now. 180. Over 180. And that is a long enough time for us to accept certain truths. Because unless we accept these truths, we can't address the problems which afflict the police force. One of the themes here, restoring public trust, recognizes the loss of public trust. So over the years, the Guyana police force has had many problems. Prominent among those problems is mistrust and distrust from the subject. Whether rightfully or wrongfully, you have that existing. You have a lack of confidence in the force. You have complaints of misbehavior being made on a rampant basis against the force. You have allegations that the force is subject to political interference. You have bribery and corruption being alleged against the force. We can't turn a blind eye to the audits and the investigations that are currently ongoing, investigating the force itself, for which many criminal charges have been instituted. We also have to look at the Police Service Commission. We are in court now, where the hierarchy of the administration of the police force seem to be in conflict with the Police Service Commission in relation to who should be promoted and who should not be promoted. When the administration of the police force and the Public Service Commission ought to be working consensually to negotiate a list that would be consensual in the end. But we are in court. Every day I am in court, or an officer of the AG office is in court, defending, justifying, mitigating actions of the Guyana police force. Some of it come with the nature of the turf, but some of it is as a result of excesses committed by police officers. Every day in the court there is a case filed alleging wrongful arrest, wrongful detention, and there is no system. Sometimes we lose because the violations are so manifest and flagrant. You can't defend it. Policeman locks up somebody, goes home, instructs no bail to be granted, clearly in what is a bailable offense. And, I have to defend that. I don't even know who's the officer. And the case is concluded in the court, the state has to pay sometimes millions of dollars in damages, and there is no account, no actions taken. against the officer who has offended the law and who has misbehaved. So he goes away scot-free, not even knowing or even recognizing that he may have done a wrong, and he does the exact thing the next day. These are the realities of what happens in the police force, and it saps public confidence. It is a given that the police force cannot, as the Commissioner rightfully said, cannot work by itself in a society if it is to effectively carry out the core objectives which I have articulated earlier. Cannot be. The success of the police force is dependent significantly on a working, harmonious relationship with the citizenry. Or else, we will have the type of relationship that we have now. And that is why so many studies, and we are not without ideas, let me tell you. I sat for 1.5 years on a commission of inquiry, the Discipline Forces Commission. It was chaired by Ian Chang, former Chief Justice. On that commission were former President David Granger, Charles Ramsden, myself, Harold Lachman, and a lady from Ireland, Maggie Byrne. And we examined all the discipline forces, made many, many recommendations, reviewed a whole host of previous studies and consultancies done. So, we are not without help. The question is the implementation of those recommendations. The police commissioner rightly spoke of recommendations to establish this PR unit. These recommendations, he said, is 2018. Yes, that was the latest one come, but they have come, they were over 20 years old. And that's the time it took to implement it. Importantly also, in 180 years of history, the structure of the police force has not changed significantly. The standing orders of the police force. How old are they, Commissioner? 50 years? Yes, 2000 the last revision was done. But there are minor changes. They are over 50 years old. Do you know how much this world has transformed over the last 20 years? Just think 20 years ago you didn't have computers. Or most of you didn't have computers. You didn't have text messaging on your phone. You didn't have internet on your phone. You couldn't take out a photograph on your phone. You couldn't see Facebook on your phone. Just imagine a life 20 years ago. The police force operating with the same structure 180 years ago. There is no organization on planet Earth that can survive in the same structure. And we expect it to function effectively. The world has transformed maybe 1 million times from 180 years ago to now. So we have recommendations, for example, to civilianize the force. Tell me why the Commissioner Secretary, whose job it is to do secretarial work for the Commission. And Commissioner, I'm not putting you on the spot, I'm giving an example. Secretarial work, a secretary. She types the Commissioner's letters. Very important function. But why does that person have to be a corporal or a sergeant or an inspector of police? Why that function can't be performed by a secretary, a civilian secretary? Why the certifying officer for vehicles have to be an inspector? The messenger of the commissioner, the one who delivers the letter, is a constable. Why the orderly in the magistrate's court has to be a constable or a sergeant? And all he has to do, you can have one policeman maintaining law and order, but all he does is to read the name of a case jacket. But that's a trained police officer you have there. The one who bathes the horse at Mountain Branch is also a police officer trained. We have to give these functions to civilians and let the police men and women do police work. And the recommendations are there. And by doing that, you are also doing a very important thing, that you are merging the police force with the society. Picture in your mind, Vigilance Police Station. You have 4 or 5 civilians working there. Come from Nandlall, Buxton, Guyana, Vigilance. You know how integrated that community will become with that police station? The people of that vicinity would feel a sense of belonging when they go to that police station. And you have to confront that reality. There is a disconnect between police and the citizen. Persons go to the police force to complain only when it's absolutely necessary. They in their minds, they don't see many communities. So these are the challenges that we have to face, and I'm happy that this workshop is organized and a process has begun by which these issues can be addressed. Now, why the PR? What is the role of the PR unit? The PR function, as you know, used to have been performed by a senior police officer who did not necessarily have any training in PR work. He's a police officer. And in the ordinary course of things, before a police press statement is issued, he has to get clearance from a number of persons within the organization. And by that time, the statement, when it is eventually issued, has lost its currency. Simply because today we live in an age of information technology. News is by the minute. And if you don't get your views out there within the first wave, then your voice can be lost and shut out completely. And tremendous damage be done in record time before your views are out there. In other words, you can lose the war even before you start. And a professional PR unit was intended largely to address this weakness. So you have an exclusive unit staffed by professionals who will enjoy the confidence of the entire police force and would be allowed to function with latitude, but also must act responsibly. And that unit should be out there every day, on every platform, pushing the agenda of the police force. Not becoming a reactionary unit, but becoming proactionary. So you outline the activities of the police force from the beginning of the month. You break the ice through the various media platforms by showcasing the leadership of the police force. And this must be done in every division. Georgetown is not Guyana. And therefore, it must be done in Essequibo, it must be done in Lethem. Everyone must know who is their commander and who is second in command of their division. And they must know the basics on how to make a report, when they are ignored by one officer, what do they do? It is the task of the PR unit to sit on the radio, sit on the television, sit on the Facebook, and do these things with and without police officers. And this is in addition to the reactionary role. This is proaction. I have suggested to the two officers that they do programs on the radio, on the television, which will be broadcast on Facebook as well, calling it police and you, or you and your police, whatever you want to call it. But start a conversation that will make the people listen and learn and be familiar with the police. And as I said, this must be done across the country. And then apart from that, you also have the responsibility of going into the community and forge a relationship between the police and the communities. Whether you use sports, cricket, football, whether you do a barbecue, whatever it is that you do, we have to break this barrier and make the people interact with the police so that this distance that exists will either be eradicated or will be shortened. And these are simple things that I'm articulating, but they require dedication. They require persistence. They require discipline. Because you're dealing with an entire country. A country that is fairly big, with a population that is scattered. So it's not an easy task. But it is that which is necessary. And within the force as well, the PR, because you have to defend these things. And that's why I am so interested in getting this force to function, because I have to defend it in the court. I have to find answers. I have to justify action. And that is why the organizations that are connected to or intrinsic in the police force must function. So you have the OPR. That must function. The Police Complaints Authority must function. And we have to find a way, Mr. Commissioner, of disciplining persons who misbehave outside of charging them. Because unless they receive some form of sanctions, then they continue to do the same thing over and over again. And we must find, I am looking at other territories in the Caribbean. Trinidad has some harsh positions. I don't want to import Trinidad's position to Guyana because the positions they take there, they charge the policemen, and not every occasion I think one should be charged. There are instances where charges are necessary. But you don't want to kill the spirit of the police force either. You want the police force to know that the state recognizes the important role that they are playing, recognizes the sacrifices that they make, the dangers to which they and their families are exposed. These are not something that I don't recognize. And the police officer must feel that when he goes out there, he has the protection of the state. Because if he doesn't feel so, then he will not discharge his function effectively. He will not step out of the ring. And you will not get the type of policing that we are entitled to or we deserve. So it's a two-way street. And that is why at some point in time we have to look at better insurance kind of coverages and so on for the force, but that will come. We are a developing country and our developmental trajectory is projected to move steeply forward now. So the state and all its apparatus will benefit from whatever wealth we are generating and we intend to generate in the near future. The police force is a vital component of the state and must be poised, to benefit in any of the improvements that are scheduled to take place among the state's employment and institutions, because you are one of the most important organs within the state. So I want to conclude by highlighting the fact that this engagement is very timely, and I hope it is the beginning of a number of similar initiatives which will bring together wider participation. I don't know why we have I was told only the liaison officers were invited here, but there is no reason why this should not have been bigger, so that you have wider participation. You have an event like this, to me, it's if you don't have the widest participation, it's not a good use of resources. So Stan and Mark, I want to thank you very much for inviting me to deliver these few brief remarks, and I wish your conference well, and I wish you both success. I don't envy the task at hand. I know that you have a very complex agenda to execute, but no doubt you were chosen as two persons who have distinguished yourself in the media fraternity in Guyana, and I have no doubt that you will put your best foot or feet forward, and we will have the expected improvements taking place in the police force. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the rest of the conference.